So unless you hit publish, unless you hit like post, you don't really ever really know what you're doing, or you don't ever get feedback. So I would say the most actionable thing, be it whatever field you're in, if you're in photography, distribute it. If you're in like whatever, if you're in music, publish it. Whatever it is, get your work out there so that you can get feedback.
In a nutshell, Ahmed Fahad is a designer and a coder and the vice president of product at Pathao. Now, if you're from Bangladesh, you most definitely have heard of Pathao, the company. But if you're not, they are a leading ride-sharing and on-demand logistics and a food delivery platform in the country. Now, at just age 17, he was part of the founding team at Pathao and has since helped the company scale rapidly, so much so that the company is valued at over $100 million. 5 years on, Fahad is still going strong at Pathao. For example, only last month, he led the launch of Pathao Tong, a grocery delivery service all over Bangladesh in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. Now, if that wasn't impressive enough, he is currently finishing up his finance degree at IBA, which is one of the most prestigious business schools in the country. Now, this episode is a bit of a curveball compared to the last 4, mainly because this one focuses on the concept of scaling an idea and the benefits of creative thinking, but not in a traditional arts or creative sense. So as a creator, if you've got an audience and you want to take your idea to the next level, a lot of the concepts in this episode could potentially be applicable for you. In this episode, we explored Fahad's life at the intersection of business and technology, how he's using creative thinking to solve problems at Pathao, and also the way he balances his studying and his fast-paced work life. Now, this is the part where I make that plug-in. So if you're watching this on YouTube, which I know a lot of you are, I hope you subscribe to the channel. I am on episode 5 and we're not even halfway through the season, so there's plenty more good episodes coming through. And as always, I have a weekly newsletter featuring some of the best digital content creators on the interweb. This is a great place for you to discover new creatives, new projects, and new art. And this is also a good place for you to get the podcast episodes before anyone else. So if you want in on the newsletter, it's at www.tausifakkas.com. Now, beyond everything else, I hope you're safe, you're healthy. This is a very, very weird time in the world right now, and it gets even weirder when you realize that I've been doing this thing, speaking into a microphone in this bedroom, and someone out there will be listening to this, and that to me gives me a sense of community that I can't get anywhere else. I always relied on digital content to connect with others, and this period of human history feels a lot more connected in a very, very weird way. So if you're one of those people who are listening to me right now, thank you so much. Now, without further ado, this is episode 5 of the State of the Creators podcast with Tausif Akkas, which is me, featuring Ahmed Fahad. Hope you enjoy the show. This is the State of the Creators, a show about creative individuals who are on a quest to build something out of nothing. I go on your Instagram stories, and there's always, despite everything, there's always that one running story. So yeah, what's your schedule like?
Yeah, my schedule is basically like I want to run at least once a week, ideally twice. Yeah. The reason I got into it is because I wasn't very athletic growing up. I wasn't really good at either football or cricket, and usually have to be one of that. Yeah. But I discovered that I could run for a while, for a long, long time. I don't think it's exceptional, but it's just something I was good at. So that's how it started, and then just kept it up.
So I guess for people who are unaware of your work, who is Ahmed Fahad?
So currently I am VP of product at Pathao, which basically means I work at the intersection of business and technology. Right. Pathao today works across Dhaka, Chittagong, Sylhet, 3 major cities in Bangladesh, and then in Nepal. Yeah. We do ride sharing, food delivery, and fulfillment, which is basically logistics for internet merchants, basically. Right. And it's been roughly 4 to 5 years since we've been running. So
you're the vice president of that side of things?
Yeah.
Okay. And you've been working there for 4 years now, did you say? What's the work anniversary?
Almost 5. So we started in 2015. Right. It's almost 2020. Right. So yeah.
Almost 5 years. Yeah. And how old are you now?
I'm 21.
That's right. On your website, you also kind of said that you are a self-taught coder, a designer. I mean, you designed the Pathao logo. First of all, how good does it feel to see your work kind of plastered all over the country?
It feels good, but it's not like a software update can go out there and put your latest version out there. So there's that. But it does feel good. I'm very grateful for all the distribution and eyeballs it has received. And
And what's the story behind it? Like the designing the logo?
So the logo was actually a collaboration between the CEO, Ilyas, and myself. And it didn't take too long.
Right.
It was basically a process of two things. One is getting the icon together, and two, the typography.
Right.
So it's slightly slanted.
Yeah.
The slanting was basically because we wanted to keep a sense of motion.
Momentum, yeah.
The motion was, so at the time that we started, it was a courier company. Right. It was logistics. Right. It was bikers delivering things from merchants to you, collecting cash, and it was not sexy at all, right? Although ride sharing, when we started it, was much more sexy.
Right.
So even at that time, we were all about speed, right? Yeah. All our services had to be delivered fast, and they had to be done by people who were themselves fast. Yeah. And so we wanted to convey something about motion through the logo. Yeah. We also wanted to convey what we were without really saying it. Right. And what we were was a bike messenger type service, which could really in a fast way, provide logistics support to small merchants, Facebook merchants, because most of Bangladesh's commerce happens on Facebook, and those were our customers, not the big people. So that was the whole idea. And then our first pattern, which is now deprecated, we redesigned and all that, but it was based on roads, Dhaka's roads, which were they go in all shapes and sizes, right?
Right. There's not like Barcelona. You look from top and it's like grids.
It is not. It's like wires, right? If you drop a bunch of wires on this table, it's like all over and it's very convoluted. That's exactly how Dhaka's road is, but it seemed like a very apt pattern for us, and so that's how the original brand identity came to be. It was inspired by Dhaka. It was inspired by movement. It was inspired by what we were doing at the time.
Right. Fantastic. And what's the story in terms of getting into this founding team? At age 17, would it be? 16, 17? Yeah.
So at the time that I started working with the other founders, I was still in high school, right? Yeah. I was still in Scholastica, and I came to office. This was not the first time that this happened. Yeah. I came to office in my school uniform. Yeah. Right? I had finished high school. I came to the office, I changed, and I then, went about the day's work. Yeah. And this was not the first time that this has happened. I previously did a gig at Chaldal, a grocery backed by Y Combinator and whatnot. Same story. Went after school. That was probably 11th or 12th grade, and changed from a uniform. And everyone loved it. They laughed at it and everything. I was like, I don't care. I'm just here to work, right? Yeah. But anyway, I joined as an intern, a web development intern at Hack House. Right. It was an incubator, a business incubator. And what that, in a nutshell, means, again, is you try a bunch of things, or what it meant for Hack House, actually, was that you try a bunch of things and you see what sticks, basically, in a nutshell. And so there, we tried a bunch of business models which made sense, or we thought made sense in Bangladesh, seeing what problems are out there and what we could actually solve, given our expertise. And our expertise was leveraging tech to, we had this term, I think it was, I don't remember what to attribute it to, but moving atoms using bits. Right. Basically leveraging technology to make real world things happen. And so we tried that with logistics in the form of CNGs before this. There are 4 failed attempts at other things before we stumbled upon Pathao, right? Right. So we tried it with CNGs, which are basically tuk-tuks or automobiles here in Bangladesh, tried to bring them on a platform. Didn't work. Long story short, we basically got pushed or shoved away from that market by the incumbents. Yeah. We tried it with events, we tried it with a bunch of things, but ultimately we did it until something found product market fit. Right. And that was Pathao at the time. Okay. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I think for you as well, that change, like from that school uniform to getting into that setup again. What made you want to do that stuff back then? Because obviously, as a school kid, people usually want to go back home, play PS4, or do whatever else. What was it like? Did you have any certain mentality from the ground up, or was it like, this is what I want to do, pretty much?
No one's asked me that before.
That's why I do this podcast.
So the honest answer is that I had a big falling out.
Okay, that's fantastic. I love that.
So I had a big falling out with my friends.
Okay.
This was after 10th grade.
Yep.
And before that, I was really tight with this bunch, right?
Yeah.
Of friends. I think we're more or less cool now, but at the time it was very passionate, or I felt very abandoned, raged. Oh shit!
All the teen hormones are just in that cauldron.
They're just coming in, all right in, right? And I had read somewhere that the teenage years in your life, the teenage years are the ones you have most energy, and you can devote whatever you want yourself. And I was wondering, hey, like, these guys, or this group has basically fallen apart. I'd really have a fallout. What do I actually focus on right now? And although I had interests because we started, 5 of my friends, different friends, started our first company in the 8th grade.
Wow.
Right? It was an events management thing. I don't know if you've heard of Enlighten.
Yeah. You used to do futsal.
Futsal.
Adnan?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you guys shared in 2011 or 12 some of the stuff we did.
Yeah, on Planting.
Yes, exactly. So we did futsal, we did gaming tournaments, etc. And through that, I was always the guy who did things sitting at home. So designing stuff or creating like an event, or writing the descriptions, or making accounting work or something like that, right? Yeah. So from that, I had kind of understood how, you put up an ad on Facebook, or you do graphic design and those kind of things. And Adnan and other friends at the time, we were also freelancing on Fiverr and Odesk and those kind of things.
Wow.
But we had never taken it too seriously. But now I had time on my hands, which I didn't really know what to do with.
Right.
So the learning how to code, learning how to design, and these kind of things, I kind of got into a rabbit hole of these things during that time.
Right.
I didn't want to speak to anyone. I didn't want to, interact with anyone. And I just threw myself into this.
Using the rage to fuel your...
Basically, all those teenage hormones, let's put it to use, right?
Yeah, fantastic.
And so, I mean, I won't say that I had learned graphic design or design, because I'm still learning, but I had started to pick up the basics of it. Yeah. I bought a bunch of books, and even beyond Photoshop and Illustrator, I was trying to learn how actually great people made their logos.
Right.
For example, like how does I don't know. There's a bunch. What's actually a title? What's actually a watermark?
Like why Nike is taking all this stuff.
Yeah, those kind of things. There's a bunch of branding books that I read, and now that I think of it, I'm like, people in university read those same books now.
Yes.
And I didn't know that those were actually textbooks.
Right.
Like that people use in universities. I was reading it in 10th or 11th grade.
Right.
And and then I picked up a bunch of coding stuff. But coding stuff wise, W3 Schools, great online resource, timeless. Really helped me pick up the basics of like Java and this and that. And I was always a front-end guy more than a back-end guy, but then I picked up JavaScript and PHP to the extent that I could make like simple login systems and those kind of things.
Right.
Anyway.
So I guess for me, it was that fact that you would be interested in so many different things, like having these different skill sets. And obviously that had a big part to play in being in the founding team of Pathao, or even your earlier endeavors, and finally becoming the VP of Pathao. So obviously going into those coding and design, any specific reason why you chose these? I mean, we now know why you got into doing all this stuff, but any specific reason why it's coding and design and not, say, I don't know, accounting, for example?
So it was intellectually like, I don't know. I think I was curious about it.
Right.
Like, how does this web page actually load?
Okay.
How does that actually work?
Yeah.
And there was that, but also because we had already started looking up at Fiverr and Odesk, now no longer called Odesk, but because we had started looking at these things, I saw what was in demand or what people were really willing to pay for.
Yep.
It was something like, so in 2013, Facebook introduced their cover photo.
Okay.
Feature thing. I distinctly remember this because I made a lot of money doing it. So I started designing cover photos for people, $5
Oof, that's a lot of money.
It was really cool.
You were cashing in on that.
Exactly. And so I was constantly looking at what was in demand and kind of teaching myself or backward teaching myself how to do that, and then offering those services.
Right.
So it was pretty interesting as a kid having dollars come into your account. But then I live in Bangladesh and there's no PayPal here, and receiving that money was a struggle in its own.
Right.
I won't go into how I actually ended up doing that. It was very tiresome, but this was one of the ways. It was intellectually it was like fun, but also I was looking at what there is in demand and. Because I was earning money, my mom was kind of happy because, hey, he's actually doing something.
Yeah, something useful. Yeah.
And I always care about that. Like, also, I think it kind of goes back to early childhood.
Yeah. So with your early childhood experiences, was it more to do with, did you draw and stuff as a kid?
No. No one actually asked me that either. But so when before I was in the first grade, my mom and dad split up.
Okay.
And I was basically raised by my mom. Right. So so my dad is still around and stuff, but I was raised by my mom. Yeah. So since first grade, we've always had this mission, if you might, my mom and I, that we have to make it.
Right.
And by make it, I mean make it in the world. Yeah. We have something to prove to ourselves, something, a chip on our shoulders, that kind of thing. Because my mom, when she moved out by herself, she kind of took this big bet that, she could raise this child as good as she could, and it would turn out well, right? Yeah. And she had something to prove to a lot of people, right? And so, honestly, man, I think my life is a series of very serendipitous events and lucky events where people took a chance on me. Right. My mom being the first, and she still continues to do it, but I'm going to come back to how this eventually led up to this, but. When she did do that, and she constantly reminded me that, you have something to prove and this and that, and we used to talk about it. It was... So in school, this affected me in one way, and even now it affects me in another. In school, it was constantly I have to do better in my grades, I have to do better in everything that I do. Right. And it worked.
Were you an A+ student?
A+ student. So 7th grade stood first, 8th grade stood second,
Fantastic.
9th grade did something. And so it was like that, right? Yeah. But overall, I felt like the fact that I always had to keep moving because, my mom constantly kept reminding me that, you have to do something. Yeah. And so I was always in that mode that, what's the best way that I could, I don't know, make my mom happy. Right. I don't necessarily know what that is, even now. Yeah. But I kind of have an indication of that, right? So anyway, with design and this kind of stuff, I thought that it was cool. I thought that it was useful. Yeah. And so I kept doing it. Right. And then eventually, after a certain point, I no longer wanted to just freelance. I wanted to see what's out in Dhaka. Right. And that's how I kind of landed the Chaldal gig, right? Right. The Chaldal gig was very interesting. I had heard and watched videos and read up of Y Combinator and all of the startup stuff. But holy shit, a Y Combinator startup in Bangladesh? Yeah. I gotta see what this is about.
Check this out,
Anyway, I made a CV, right? And this CV from a 11th grader had no indication that it was from an 11th grader. And so I had spent a lot of time on it, did a bunch of stuff, and I sent it in. And just like everyone else, I was evaluated until the final day when I actually had to come in as an 11th grader and show up, right? And so I did that. And then it was a very funny interview because I was 16 at the time.
Right.
And the founder and my boss and those people, they asked me, would it be illegal to hire you? Would this be child labor? Exactly. So that was very interesting because I was working there as a designer.
Right.
I basically had to do two things. One is create AdWords graphics and Facebook posts, and I actually did some mock-ups for their first mobile app. I don't know how much of that they used. I think just a bit, but I think even up till a couple of years ago, their web interface contained icons that I had put in there. I got to work. I had a great time, and I'm eternally grateful that they actually hired me at the time because they had choices.
Right.
There was this, during the interview process, I was so intimidated because there were 5 other people sitting there. Some people had worked for Microsoft Bangladesh.
Right.
They were developers, right? Some of them had, and I realized why they chose me later on. I think I do. I have my interpretation of it. Some people were like seasoned agency people, as you said, like agency boom at the time, right? And so the fact that they chose me, I'm eternally grateful for it. And I got to work with their CTO, creating like these, and who's I think now based in like San Fran or something, but who helped me like understand. Google had just released their material design thing in 2013 or 14. I got to like work with that right off the bat. Or at least design for it as best as I could. And then I got to work with a really talented developer. I got to work on the Facebook side of things. I finally learned what Facebook Pixel or Google AdWords, what these things are. And all of this was when I was in 11th grade. So it was a steep learning curve for me, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I think the reason they chose me was because on my CV, I kind of made it a project of its own. Right. I went overboard. I went full overboard. I made illustrations of stuff, etc. And today we're taught keep it to one page.
Correct. All these formulas.
I broke all the rules because I didn't know the rules.
Right.
So that was very interesting at the time because I got to do that. And then after Chaldal, I was like, okay, so the graphic side of things are cool, but I don't think that's what smart people really do. Right. I don't know if you've ever had this perception, but I always get this perception that marketing, the creative side of things, these are what, a different kind of people do. Right. The smart people pick the quant, pick coding, pick finance, pick this, that,
of course. I mean, we've been taught that stuff even when we were kids, and I was telling you off air, right, like creativity is cool until the year 10 or year 12 because you get all the clout from creativity, he knows how to sing, I'm a chileko with my kid can recite poems and stuff like that. But then the moment you graduate from school and you go into the real world, all of it that is usually we're taught to throw it out because that's useless. That's what people who are not smart does that stuff. So I'm absolutely, I can totally get what you're saying.
So at the time I was thinking, okay, so there's all this creative stuff that I could learn more about, but then coding seems to be what all the smart people are really doing. Right. And this includes people I was following at the time, Guru Mantam Jadarke, and I want to be more like this person. They were all coders, right? And so I wanted to get into a gig where I could be more of a coder. Right. And that's what the internship at Hack House, the web development intern, was all about. So long story short, I met Fahim, who started Hack House at a party thing. And I don't go to parties, right? I go to networking events as an 11th grader. It's kind of crazy now. But there was this thing called Drink Entrepreneurs.
Yes, by Saqib Jamal.
Exactly. Yep. Later did a podcast with him, but also never released it.
Really?
Anyway,
good
so
guy.
One of those events, I went to that. And then I met Fahim. And it was very interesting and fascinating to hear what he was trying to do in Dhaka and those kind of things. And I decided that, hey, he had a cool website. The office looks cool. It seems like there's a lot of smart people here. And more than anything else, I could actually start doing actual web development as a job, maybe, if I got in.
Yeah.
Again, applied, unorthodox CV, still don't know how to actually do a CV.
Yeah.
And so on the day of the interview, I think there were 8 or 9 people who had like applied.
Yeah.
I was sure that I didn't get in,
Yeah.
but I wanted to still go.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went in and he looked at my CV and there was other interviews happening simultaneously. And he basically told me on the spot that, this is all cool, but why don't you do a project? Okay, what project? Make a website.
Right.
What website? Everything you have on your CV, put it on a website and and then send it back to me. That's a very good proof of like whatever you're able to do.
It's a very forward thinking back 5 years ago. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, but I need a domain and whatnot. Yeah, but you said you can like do things on free domains. That is true.
Yeah.
There were free domains back
Yeah.
then. It's
Yeah.
.tk or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm like, okay, but that's a lot of work. I was thinking to myself, but I was like, yes, sir. Okay, cool. And then I'll go and opposite, like in the boardroom, he also got me to meet Ilyas and Adnan for the first time. Yeah. And funnily enough, that was the first time that I had talked about, like, there was this other app that we were conceptualizing and working on back at school with my friend. It was this thing to help me or us talk to girls.
That's very
serving your own needs. Serving your own needs.
Very, very useful. I know, like lots of apps have come out of that, that meet. So it's absolutely.
I'll tell you what. We were I speak for myself. I had no clue how to go about this.
Right.
And this app was called potentially Wingman.ai.
Oh wow.
Right.
That's a sick name.
What it would basically do is either on Messenger or WhatsApp, it would take the last message that the other person gave you, search on Google for like the most interesting replies to that said statement, and just feed it back to you. That's basically what it would do. Right. We never ended up completing it or publishing it or anything of that sort, but we took the idea, we made a pitch deck, didn't know what it was called, but we made a pitch deck, and then we went to investors, like
legit investors.
Legit investors bolte ki angel type investors, right? People with money. And those people with money took us to development teams, who actually coded and did like outsourcing, those kind of things, and asked them, is this possible? They're like, yes, it's possible. This is how you would do it. These are the APIs. We actually dug up the APIs, and this is a good exercise even before I started at Hack House, to actually start like an idea from nothing, from our heads, from our frustrating teenage hormones, to an actual product, right? And it was very fun actually going to places like I had never gone to development teams, like actual places, but this angel investor person actually took us there. And all of these places, it was our idea that we'd have to sell again and again, and we were high school students, but they didn't know that. But anyway, so that was the first time I was actually talking about this. And so the task was, coming back to the Hack House interview, the task was within 2 days, make your portfolio website and send it back to me. So, okay, all-nighter, did, and then I also put a bunch of projects on Behance for the first time. These were all things that I had done as gigs on Fiverr. So they weren't really projects. They were one-off logos that I made for people. But I was sure to attach like a bit of story about how I came up with this, what it actually means, and make a presentation out of it. Put it on Behance, link it back to the website, and set up a domain, set up a hosting, all of this for free, because I didn't actually have a credit card or anything. So did all of that, sent it back to Fahim, and I was like ready for my job offer. Send it to me now, right? In my head, basically. And the dude just doesn't reply. 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, he just does not reply. And I'm like,
you're the one who told me to do all this shit.
Yeah, I mean, at least tell me that I'm rejected. Come on.
This is the worst.
I deserve that. But he just doesn't reply. And then I follow up. I double text on the email. And I'm like, hey, just wanted to check. whether you got it. This is the link.
Yeah.
And then he finally replied after 5 days, and he's like, I was traveling and I was busy, but you know what? You're hired. Oh, yeah. Someone will reach out to you very soon.
Fantastic.
Yada, 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 and cool. And then someone did reach out to me, and it was a cool starting point.
Right.
I started, this was summer vacation, and so I started going to work, and it was full time. And although they knew that I was in high school, they didn't really feel it because I was coming into work the same time they were, and everything was pretty much normal. The fun started once, and we made a bunch of product before even I went back to school. Things like Product Hunt for, Product Hunt, right?
Yeah.
It's a really cool website where the latest products, the coolest things are always up, right? So we made that for Dhaka. This taught us a bunch of things. One was I got to work with, and this was all, Ilyas was my supervisor at this point, right? So he basically told me, Fahad, by the end of your internship, you'll work on a bunch of cool projects and you'll have a bunch of stuff to show. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. And so Product Hunt for Dhaka was great. I got to work with Meteor.js. It was a new technology that was at the time. And for the first time, I was writing code in production and all of that stuff. It's really cool. And there was only one problem. There was no need to make this. There were no products that was spinning out in Dhaka at that pace to actually serve, to be the content for this product, right? So we made 5 different versions of the platform. Just because. But there was no need to actually make it. And that taught me, I think, more than anyone else, it taught me a very interesting lesson about product market fit. You can make a great product. It can have great mock-ups. It can have the best, latest technology. But if
nobody needs it,
if people don't need it, if it's not solving a real problem, you don't have market fit, and it just dies. And so similarly, worked on Jabin, CNG app.
I want to go back to your age, right? Because people perceive you based on your age, and obviously you're breaking that perception that age, it does not really matter as much. Do you get that same treatment now, despite being do people question your credibility because of your age? And how do you deal with that?
It's definitely a real thing, and I think age, I think it wouldn't be fair to say age doesn't matter. I think it definitely does. There's a lot of things that I didn't know, or I actually don't know most things. And so with experience comes, as they say, I don't mean to sound all philosophical, but with age comes wisdom or something like that, right? But I think I found it useful to be open about what I don't know. To be humble about what I don't know, but then what I do know, putting it out there and seeing whether it is a meritocracy. So far, the culture that we've kind of fostered both at Hack House and ultimately for the past 5 years at Pathao has been one of idea meritocracy, where the best ideas actually make it.
Sustain,
That's been very true in the tech org especially, where, if your idea is better than mine, you can take it. Take it forward.
I guess that culture it's a fostering culture at the end of the day. But with people questioning that, how do you deal with that then? Do you just kind of put it out there and let my work speak for itself? So
2 things. I mean, one is that I try not to be a know-it-all. I try to be a learn-it-all.
It's fantastic.
And I've had I wasn't always like this. It was very hard for me, actually.
So were you always the...
No, I was snide. I made snide comments, and it would piss people off. And then I would get those negative feedbacks, but it didn't happen twice in the same way. I made sure that I iterated on it. I mean, it turns out that most things, if people kind of just tell you, or at least for me, if they tell me that, hey, this is the right way and this is the wrong way, and I kind of make sense of it, I won't do it again. And then I've just had to learn it on the job mostly. About how to put ideas out there and then establish points which actually justify them and whatnot. But it wouldn't happen unless there's a culture where ideas win. So I think that's very important.
With your current lifestyle, so obviously being the VP and doing full-time studying at fucking IBA.
Yeah.
How do you manage that? Because
a bit less sleep.
that definitely comes into play. But what's your, I guess, how do you do it essentially? And not just do that, do it well. Because it's one thing just doing it and scraping by, but I'm sure you're doing well in university and you're also doing well at where you work. So how do you balance?
Yeah, I mean, time management essentially is the name of the game, right?
Yeah.
I've not been good at it historically, but I've been learning how to discipline myself a bit more.
Yep.
So it's kind of like when I'm doing something, making sure that it's a block of time that I've assigned to it, and then not going over time, just really concentrating.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, this is good and bad because I get really intense and tunnel vision-ish.
Yep.
But it's good because I don't carry that work forward.
Right.
But it's also because I don't really have a choice.
Right.
Unless I'm able to like do it, it doesn't get done, and then it just spirals out of control. And so maintaining that order, time management is a big piece. Second would be really, so although I might like come off, and I have been for most of my life pretty, moving on to the next thing, move fast, break things, that kind of a culture.
Yeah.
This past 2 years-ish, I've been pretty in touch with like being present, being like mindful,
Turning
and those
off,
kind of things.
Yeah.
Not even turning off, just being present in the moment. I've been meditating for roughly a year now, like regularly.
And has it helped?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean,
so do you have a routine where you like specifically meditate and do?
Yeah, I mean, I tried that for a couple of months,
yeah.
but then I kept missing the cycle, and my app keeps missing the streak. Exactly. Huh? Yeah, and then
he's a big proponent of it.
Big proponent, and for good reason.
Yeah.
Because unless you get that right, it's kind of hard to even approach things. Anyway, so I found being present in whatever I'm doing to be supremely necessary.
Right.
I was going to say helpful, but it's necessary.
Right.
It's not just
it's a good choice of word. Yeah.
So there's so many things. I think there's one word that really resonates with me, or quotation or maxim, if you may.
Yeah.
Control the controllables. There are a ton of things life is constantly like throwing at you.
Yeah.
And for me, that's like from different spheres. It's not just work even, right? And then there's also a bunch of stuff that I'm doing with community stuff, with global shapers and those kind of things. I also have like inclinations to travel and passions and those kinds.
Yeah.
So there's all of these things that life keeps throwing at me, you and me. And I found prioritization to be the name of the game.
Right.
Where if I don't have to, if it's not actionable right now, I'll not think about it right now. I'll allot some time to actually think about it, but not right now.
Yeah.
I won't get overwhelmed. I won't let myself just go into a spiral of, anxiety.
So in fact, there's one thing. You have read The One Thing? Have you read The One Thing?
I've read the summary.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he talks about, Gary, he talks about prioritizing, right?
Yeah.
And prioritizing, basically, we use the word priorities,
Yeah.
right? Essentially, that's an oxymoron because you have to have one priority. So, which means you have to say no to a lot of things.
Yep.
In your case, you'd have to say no to a lot of things. How do you go about that without, I guess, while still maintaining
commitments, right?
Commitments and relationships and...
So I say one thing at a time.
Right.
One thing at a time. And that means I'll have to cover a bunch of things, but I'll do it one at a time and I'll finish one thing and then the next. So that's basically it. We can go into like all these techniques and whatnot, which actually are kind of useful. For example, batching. Let's say I'm going to do emails. I'll just do emails for the next hour.
Right.
Same type of work rather than switching between emails and writing something or creating a different thing.
So no multitasking.
Exactly.
Right.
And so batching is useful.
Yep.
There are a bunch of productivity hacks that are always like here and there, and I've tried to pick up on them. Batching is one. Then the other is I put my phone on airplane mode quite a lot.
That's
quite
fantastic. That's useful.
And it's good. It's just black out, do the thing, then go back on Instagram and post right? That's fine. There's this one quotation that keeps going on in my mind. What doesn't get measured doesn't get, managed. So, and I try to apply that in all spheres, right? So I start by weighing myself. I do some meditation either in the morning or maybe sometime in the day. Yeah. And then throughout the day, I go about it like previous night, I kind of have in my head what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I just go about it. I usually use Trello to organize tasks.
Yeah.
I use buckets.
Yeah.
What do I need to do today, and what's actually a project.
Right.
There's this nice concept of GTD, get things done.
Yep.
Big fan of that whole format, and I think I've kind of set up my own Trello boards accordingly.
Okay.
I won't elaborate on that because that's a whole rabbit hole, but GTD, really good.
How important it is, I mean, you're part of the Global Shapers. How important it is, first tell me what you do there briefly, and then how important do you think it is to have a community or an environment to support your goals, and do you actually do that?
So the Global Shapers in a nutshell is basically looking at local problems, Dhaka-specific problems, and then not necessarily doing projects per se, but understanding what contribution we could have.
Right.
So for example, one of the projects that we do is, or used to do, we've currently no longer proceeding with it, but Talgol. What Talgol kind of addresses is something you're very passionate about, which is football, right?
Yes.
And the social problem, which is the lack of places to actually play football for kids, right? Especially for underprivileged kids. And by underprivileged...
Why haven't you reached out to us yet? Why haven't you reached out to us yet?
I don't know.
Come on,
I think there's a collaboration here waiting to happen.
I know. But anyway, go on.
Anyway, so Talgol was basically about slum kids and providing them access to actual, not just sports, but everything that comes with sports. Having a coach, having someone, that discipline of, learning a sport, it changes people, especially people who don't have necessarily the best role models or the best upbringing, etc. These are essentially sons and daughters of garments workers who are constantly busy and those kind of things. And so we brought them, and we hired a coach, and he was being more of a mentor, a role model for them, and it turned out to be really cool. And at the end of it, there are 5 or 4 different locations where this was happening, and at the end of it, it led up to a tournament where all of them played.
Right.
And so that was kind of the example of what the Global Shapers wants to do here. Yeah. In terms of people to support and boost you up, I think having a community of, I wouldn't say like-minded people, because I don't believe in that.
Absolutely.
Per se. Diversity is always good. But people with similar values, perhaps, who may vary in their interpretation of things, but are similarly open-minded, similarly open to new ideas, those kind of people. It's always a good thing. And for me, I'm very grateful to have the access to those people. And it's been supremely helpful outside of work to interact with those people.
Yeah. Tell me about the creative process that you usually have to do on a day-to-day basis, the VP of Pathao.
So we address creative problems by assessing how big the problem really is.
Right.
So for example, a project that we are currently working on, and it's fine to talk about this, is, so our courier business is now 5 years old.
Yeah.
Right? And most of these businesses are pretty analog. It's starting to get digital now with new players, startups actually doing things better. But even today, our delivery agents are assigned orders to actually deliver last mile still via phone.
Right.
Phone calls or Google Sheets, or actually maybe even on paper, and all of these things. And the packages, these consignments, as we call it, these things often don't have a tracking ID because the business owner didn't assign it or something. There are a bunch of problems like this, and as a result, packages get lost. We don't really know productivity of these employees, etc. So we looked at this problem as a whole. It's a big mess. We put it into something is practiced globally, but not so much we've seen locally, is the design sprint. The design sprint, as it was first published by Google Ventures people, they basically publish it as a 5-day thing where you take a problem, you discuss it, you identify it, you distill it into what the real problems are. You define the scope of what you will actually solve for, because problems are endless, but you kind of have to define what you'll tackle today or right now. So you define the scope, and then you go into how you might solve those problems. And it's actually an approach. How might we do X? These are all what the sticky notes are all about, right? And so you bring in all the stakeholders as well. So I can't solve this alone.
Yep.
I have to bring in both the designers, the engineers to tell us what's possible, and then the operations people who are actually day-to-day running the show. Because I have my ideal scenarios in my head. Oh, this will work like this, etc.
Yeah.
And they break those bubbles when they come in, right? And then we also have, let's say, the CFO, because this requires, let's say, sending 10,000 more SMSs, right?
Yeah.
And then we also have the CEO. Let's actually get his opinion.
Yeah.
And then we actually go and interview the person who's actually going to use this,
right.
the agent. This person never owned a smartphone before.
Right.
This person uses like a sheet of paper to know which person he'll go to next.
Right.
And, he's just moved to Dhaka or something like that, right? And he doesn't want to carry a smartphone because at night he thinks he'll get mugged. So how do you design for that?
Right.
How do you design a solution that actually satisfies all these stakeholders and also doesn't get this guy mugged?
And obviously you've got a lead who would, take this from inception to all the way to...
So for things which, right now we're pretty lean. For things like this, I'm usually that person.
Right.
And so for this project, we've gone from start to end, mapped everything out. What is our scope? Because there's so many problems here. And then who needs to be in the room? How do we solve it? Creating some prototypes and then going and seeing how far from reality we really are.
Right.
And then iterating again and again and again. And until we actually have something that kind of makes sense overall, we can't really stop. And again, it sounds like a long process, right?
Yeah.
But we compress this into roughly 4 days.
Right. That's crazy.
So it's basically...
It's kind of like a marathon. Pretty much like
sprint.
a hackathon. Yeah,
it's a sprint.
Yeah.
It's named aptly.
Yeah, exactly. It's a sprint, of course. Now it clicks.
Right? And so, again, I think creativity is kind of like, to me, it seemed very elusive.
Right.
Because I was telling you even before we started that
Yes.
I don't know what it means to be creative.
Correct.
Previously, I would think that it would take a Steve Jobs moment to actually come up with a solution that works and is accepted by users.
Right.
Now I've come to believe that it takes more than one person and it takes more than one attempt.
Right. Absolutely.
It needs all, and thus the approach has like firmly gone into me that it requires all the stakeholders in the room. It requires multiple iterations of testing and it requires many proofs of concept before we actually build it.
Yeah.
Because I view the engineer's time as something that has huge opportunity cost. Right?
Absolutely.
And so that's how creative process in my day-to-day has currently shaped up.
Right.
We did a similar process for Pathao Food.
Yeah.
Pathao Food is, when it started, had more restaurants, like 5 times more restaurants than the incumbent players.
Yeah.
And it had a big problem of discoverability. When you have 4,000-ish restaurants and all of these are, and we needed 4,000 restaurants or something around that because our mission was to bring, the average basket size at the time was like $500. We wanted to bring that to like, let's say 50.
Right.
We brought on Star Kebab. Star Kebab again is the local favorite, but it has very small basket sizes.
Yeah.
Whereas people, the 2 incumbent players at the time, they had sushi and all these nice food.
Yeah.
They were doing a good job, but they weren't serving majority of the urban population, right? And so that was our mission. We wanted to make it like more wider and distributed.
Yeah.
So with that came a problem in terms for the app, which is where I kind of like do my work.
Yeah.
This problem of discoverability.
Right.
And so we took that, we put it through this process. It took much longer the first time around, but we got all the stakeholders in. We decided what's possible, what's not. Do we put pictures, icons? What do we do?
Yeah.
And got to a similar result. And that thing has lasted us 2 years. And I wouldn't say it's the best or by any means the best we could do, but it was something that we were able to put out in a very short amount of time.
Right.
And so for startups especially, you have to muster creativity or whatever we mean by that in a very short amount of time and ship it and see what mistakes you've made. And we've made a lot of mistakes, but we've been able to put things out to replace them fast.
And we've spoken about this as well before we went on air, is how, the term creativity, even doing this podcast, I wanted to focus just on creative people per se, but then I thought, it's anybody who creates something could have creativity, and essentially they're creators, and which is why I decided to name that podcast as it is. So
that makes sense.
With creativity, we generally think it's doing something that's entertaining, something that's artsy, something that's people would find engaging, but at the end of the day, it's making sure something works from point A to point B in a way that's not usually the norm, because sometimes obstacles actually induce creativity more often than not, because if you're putting out this project and you hit some financial obstacle, the CFO has to think, okay, how can we get more sort of things working on this end? So I think it's very cool that you brought that up.
Just to supplement that, there's this one quote that's really grown on me. It's constraints breed creativity.
Right, there you go. Yeah.
Right? We found it time and time again. When we were a startup that was bootstrapping, when we were a startup that didn't have, let's say, like serious funding, we had a particular way of doing things, and those constraints ultimately got creativity. When there was a new regulation in place, we kind of had to work with that. And that brought something else. 2019 has been a very challenging year for Pathao. Right. We've had to be very flexible. We've had to be take the punches, roll with the punches, and kind of try to turn the ship around and get into a positive direction. Hopefully we'll get somewhere. But throughout this whole process, one thing keeps coming back is, if you view these challenges, these constraints as, impediments that are there to block you, they will. But if you try to find workarounds and have that approach, that's what you'll do. Right.
I actually want to touch base on that as well. We're almost nearing to the end of the podcast, but about the challenges that you face at Pathao, right? And obviously, and I'll be very candid here in this case, where you've had some controversies, especially I think a quote that you would have said a few years, was it last year?
Like
that. And that, I remember seeing it on papers, I remember seeing your name out there. First of all, how did that come about? And second of all, with, I guess, the backlash that you would have received, how did you deal with that? And kind of, move on and still keep going strong. Title of my next rap album. So tell me about that moment, or other failures, or other not failures per se, but other challenges that you would have overcome.
So with these startups, and by startups I mean this is the one that actually have gone the farthest, if you may, but there's always a new challenge. Some challenges are public, some are private, some are internal, but every day there's something new that's coming in. And I think the biggest challenge since day one was convincing people to work here. Does this place have a future? Does this place, is it going somewhere? That was a challenge. Raising money to actually scale this thing was a challenge. Or even the fact that motorbikes doing as a mode of transportation, this was not a thing.
No.
Four years ago in Bangladesh, this was not a thing. It was there in Indonesia, Vietnam, etc. And the thing that we even tried then was, could this be an acceptable mode of transportation, right? When in hindsight, it seems kind of obvious, because it's a city of 18 million people. There are roughly 50,000 CNGs, and I might be getting my numbers wrong, but maybe 30,000 buses or something. And yet we have more people per square kilometer than any city in the world. It's one of the most densely populated cities. Of course, motorbike taxis would make sense, but we didn't know. And so from day one, it's been a matter of, finding out, or having hypotheses and then testing it in the real world and seeing what sticks. This year's has been no different. There's been challenges, public ones, and we've just had to problem solve and just do them.
Right. And I guess in terms of who you look up to personally, is there anyone that you personally think works as an inspiration for you right now, locally, globally, maybe a few of them that you, and why, more importantly?
I mean, since childhood, I think, and this is there are many inspiring people that locally I look up to and I go to advice for, and those kind of people. Even like Ilyas Adnan and the entire team. These are, and many of the developers and many of the team members are extremely like inspiring in their own right. So I won't go into that list of people because there are so many.
I guess the question that I would follow up with is how important do you think is mentorship for a creator?
Pretty, I'd say supremely important, because when it's, for me, the type of work that I do, it's at the intersection of business and technology, but it's also so you could do this at an established company, you could do this at IBM, and you don't really have the, I don't know, maybe you do, maybe I'm selling it short, but you don't really have the worry of the company failing if this doesn't work.
Right.
So while working, there's also that added constraint, right? So I think having mentors to go and bounce ideas off, get some perspective is supremely important. It has been for me.
Right.
Sharing my challenges, understanding their advice, their perspectives have been supremely important. Since childhood, I think like this is going to be cliche, but Bill Gates has been like someone I've read about and
have you seen the latest
again.
Netflix doc?
I have.
Good?
Yeah, it's cool.
I have it downloaded, I haven't seen it yet.
It's cool. But stuff like that. But when you think about that, he had a lot of things, and this is a perspective that I've grown over the years, that because I've been following this guy since 7th grade, but he had a lot of lucky breaks.
Right.
If some things didn't go like according to as it did, maybe he wouldn't be where he is. For example, having access to computers as early as he did, when computers were just starting to, like that too in high school, where computers were just starting to like get accessible to companies, and you'd have to hook up to a big mainframe. And the fact that he went to well-off school, huge. Because and I don't know, this is pattern recognition on my part, because I wasn't supposed to go to Scholastica. It's probably the second most expensive school in Dhaka after ISD probably. And being raised by a single mom, I wasn't really supposed to go to that school.
Right.
But my mom was like hell-bent on sending me there because she didn't really want me to have anything less than if you were a full family or something like that. But big thing that could have gone the other way. And I think Scholastica was really good at, I don't know,
shaping you into who you are.
I think so.
Goal in 5 years, personally.
Goal in 5 years. I want to keep building things in and for Bangladesh. That's my goal. I want to, like, overarching, and why is that my goal? I think I have this sense of, I don't know, doing something which impacts people on a large scale. If you ask me why, I wouldn't really know how to answer that, but that's generally what gives me like most fulfillment.
Right. I guess finally, for someone listening in who wants to walk your path, as a creator, as a someone who wants to work between that intersection of business and technology, as you put it, what is one actionable step that they can take right now? Taking the, turning off the podcast and do basically, what would you recommend? Has to be actionable, and it can't be never give up, always follow your dreams, all that kind of stuff. It has to be actionable.
I'll get to the action bit, but I think it stems from this thing of putting it out there.
Right.
So unless you hit publish, unless you hit like post, you don't really ever really know what you're doing, or you don't ever get feedback. So I would say the most actionable thing, be it whatever field you're in, if you're in photography, distribute it. If you're in like whatever, if you're in music, publish it. Whatever it is, get your work out there so that you can get feedback.
Right.
Unless and until you do that, you're still stuck in your own head, and you're not really learning. You're not learning. The key to this is trying, failing, iterating. I once said this, and since then it's been like written a bunch of times on stuff in the office. It's a kind of an obnoxious quote. Build, fuck up, learn. Build, fuck up, learn. And you kind of have to put it out there. Unless and until you do that, you won't get feedback and you won't get better. So whatever it is, whatever you're double thinking or whatever, just publish. Put it out there.
Fahd, where can we follow your journey?
So it's pretty much the same handle across all social platforms. It's
Smart.
making it very trackable. AMDFAD, Fad. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everything same. And then ahmedfahad.com if you're looking into my narcissistic website.
Is this the same website that FindMy made you do? Or has it gone back?
That was ahmedfahad.xyz, and before that it was .tk, because those were free domains I got.
It's great to see you rise up in the trajectory. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. I'll catch you soon.